Oman, formerly known as the Sultanate of Oman, is a sovereign nation situated in the southeastern portion of the Arabian Peninsula within West Asia. The country is bounded by land borders with three neighboring states: Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Yemen. Its expansive coastline looks out toward the Arabian Sea to the southeast, while its northeastern shores face the Gulf of Oman. Oman also encompasses distinct geographic exclaves, namely Madha and Musandam, both of which are surrounded by the land borders of the United Arab Emirates. The coastal boundaries of the Musandam exclave are formed by the strategic waters of the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf of Oman. Demographically, Oman is home to a population of approximately 5.46 million inhabitants and spans a total geographic area of 315,331 square kilometers, which translates to roughly 121,750 square miles. The capital city, which also serves as the nation's largest urban center, is Muscat. Historically, Oman holds the distinction of being the oldest independent state in the entire Arab world. Since the year 1744, it has been continuously governed by the Al-Saud dynasty. Starting in the 17th century, Oman established itself as a major regional power, developing a maritime empire that actively competed with both the Portuguese and British empires for commercial and political influence over the Persian Gulf and the wider Indian Ocean. At the absolute zenith of its power during the 19th century, Omani territorial control and systemic influence stretched across the Strait of Hormuz into regions that later became parts of Iran and Pakistan, reaching as far south as the island of Zanzibar. By the 20th century, the country transitioned into the political sphere of influence of the British Empire, though it formally and de jure preserved its sovereign independence. From an economic perspective, Oman possesses substantial natural wealth, with its proven oil reserves ranked globally as the 22nd largest. The country's domestic trajectory was highlighted in 2010 when the United Nations Development Programme formally recognized Oman as the single most improved nation in the world regarding overall development over the course of the preceding 40 years. Compared to several other states in the Persian Gulf region, Oman's economic framework exhibits a lower level of absolute reliance on fossil fuels. Consequently, a noticeable segment of the national economy is driven by the expansion of tourism, alongside the active trade of fish, dates, and various other forms of agricultural produce. The financial standing of the nation is highly regarded by global institutions, leading the World Bank to classify Oman as a high-income economy. Furthermore, in terms of global stability, the country achieved a ranking of the 42nd most peaceful nation in the world within the Global Peace Index as of the year 2024. Politically, the country is structured as an absolute monarchy. It is governed by a sultan, and the sovereign power within this system is strictly passed down through the established male lineage. Sultan Qaboos bin Said stands as one of the most transformative figures in modern Omani history, serving as the ruling sultan from 1970 until his passing in 2020. His historic reign is celebrated as the dawn of the Omani Renaissance, an era that catalyzed an immense rise in the general living standards of the population, oversaw the total abolition of slavery, brought a definitive end to the Dhofar rebellion, and resulted in the formal promulgation of the official constitution of Oman. Following his death in 2020, Haytham bin Tariq ascended to the throne, succeeding Qaboos as the reigning Sultan of Oman. On the international stage, Oman maintains deep institutional ties, holding active memberships in prominent organizations including the United Nations, the Arab League, the Gulf Cooperation Council, the Non-Aligned Movement, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation.
Etymology.
The historical roots of the nation's name are deeply ancient. The oldest known written mention of the word Oman was discovered inscribed upon a tomb located within the Imlia Archaeological Center, which is situated in the United Arab Emirates. This epigraphic evidence dates back approximately to the year 220 BCE, featuring the name written as utilizing the ancient South Arabian script, while simultaneously appearing as within the Aramaic language script. Scholars believe that the usage of the name Oman predates both the classical historical references made by Pliny the Elder to Omana and the geographical documentations by Ptolemy, who referred to the location as Omenon, which translates in Greek texts to Omenon Emporion. During the course of the 19th century, the vast majority of historical writers tended to localize the ancient site of Omana with the city of Sohar. This general consensus shifted dramatically with the subsequent rise and advent of modern archaeological science. Within the Arabic language, the linguistic origin of the city or wider region is most commonly etymologized as deriving directly from the words Armin or Arman. These specific terms carry the literal meaning of settled people, serving as an explicit socio-cultural contrast to the nomadic lifestyles led by the Bedouins. Beyond this linguistic derivation, there are several alternative historical theories regarding the etymology of the name. Some conceptual hypotheses propose that the region was named after an eponymous historical founder, with figures such as Oman bin Ibrahim al-Khalil, Oman bin Sibba, bin Yaqdhan bin Ibrahim, or Oman bin Khartan being suggested. Conversely, other theories suggest that the name Oman actually traces its true geographical origin back to a specific valley located in Marib, Yemen. This particular valley is heavily presumed by historians to have served as the true ancestral homeland of the Azd, who were an ancient Bedouin tribe. prominently mentioned in various pre-Islamic inscriptions, most notably within Sabbaic inscriptions originating from the historical reign of King Shah Orta between 210 and 230 CE. Throughout its extensive existence, Oman has also been identified by several completely different names depending on the civilization interacting with it. The ancient Sumerians along with the Mesopotamians referred to this geographic area as Magan, a direct nominal reference to the historic Magan civilization. On the other hand, the Persians chose to call the region Mazan. This Persian term was etymologically derived from the core word, muzen, which specifically means clouds and abundant flowing water. This particular naming convention highlights the early establishment and long-term prosperity of agriculture within Oman since ancient times, as well as the deep social stability and advanced civilization that naturally accompanied it. Furthermore, the specific name, Oman, is clearly documented throughout classical Arabic sources as denoting an entirely independent region. Notable geographers and historical figures such as Al-Istakri and Ibn Hawqal explicitly referred to this status in their preserved sayings, stating that Oman is a region with independent regions with spacious people. The famous historian Ibn Khaldun was even more explicit and precise in his formal definition of Oman. He specifically catalogued it among the highly distinct Arab regions that successfully emerged as fully independent states within the wider Arabian Peninsula, grouping it alongside Yemen, the Hijaz, Hadramaut, and Ash-Shi. In describing its unique overarching system of governance, Ibn Khaldun directly noted that it operated fundamentally as a sole sultanate region.
Prehistory and ancient history.
The deep archaeological record of Oman reveals human activity stretching far back into antiquity. A major breakthrough occurred in the year 2011 within the Dhofar Governorate of Oman, specifically at the site of Al-Abat al-Awal. Archaeological excavations at this location successfully uncovered more than 100 distinct surface scatters composed of ancient stone tools. These artifacts were identified as belonging to a highly specific African lithic industry known as the Late Nubian Complex, a technological tradition that had previously been discovered exclusively within the northeastern regions and the Horn of Africa. In order to determine the precise age of these stone tools, scientists utilized two separate optically stimulated luminescence age estimates. The scientific results successfully place the age of this Arabian-Nubian complex at approximately 106,000 years old. This crucial chronological finding strongly supports the broader anthropological proposition that early populations of human beings actively migrated out of Africa and moved into the Arabian Peninsula during the late Pleistocene epoch. In more recent years, extensive archaeological surveys conducted along the eastern coast of Oman have continued to uncover numerous Paleolithic and Neolithic sites. Among the primary Paleolithic locations identified by researchers is the site of Saiwan Gunam, which is situated within the Bahr al-Hikman region. Furthermore, the archaeological record becomes incredibly rich and numerous when transitioning into the Bronze Age, particularly during the historical periods associated with the and Nar and Wadi Suk cultures. This advanced societal development is highly visible at the famous archaeological sites of Bat, Al-Jannah, and Al-Ain. At these locations, a wide array of material culture has been incredibly well preserved over millennia. These items include highly sophisticated wheel-turned pottery, meticulously handmade stone vessels, various metal industry artifacts, and examples of monumental architecture.
The Magan civilization in the Iron Age.
During the ancient era, the region of Oman was deeply intertwined with the overarching trade networks of the ancient Near East. Ancient Sumerian tablets explicitly referred to the territory of Oman by the name Magan, while corresponding texts written in the Akkadian language recorded the name as Makan. This specific naming convention directly links to Oman's highly prized and ancient copper resources. These cuneiform texts provide clear references to the historical Magan civilization, an ancient cultural and economic region encompassing what constitutes modern-day Oman and the United Arab Emirates. The Magan civilization was regularly documented in Sumerian cuneiform writings starting around the year 2300 BCE, and it continuously existed as a highly vital entity until roughly 550 BCE. Throughout this long time span, it served as a primary and indispensable source of high-quality copper and diorite for the major city-states of Mesopotamia. As the region transitioned into the 8th century BCE, historical traditions indicate that a ruler named Yarub, who was a direct descendant of Khartoum, held dominion over the entire geographic region of Yemen, an expansive territory that explicitly included Oman within its borders. Following this period, the region came under the rule of Wathil bin Himyar bin Abd Shams, Saba bin Yashjub, Yaman bin Yarub bin Khartoum. Based on these genealogies and accounts, it is widely believed by historians that the Yaruba represented the absolute first group of settlers to migrate into Oman directly from Yemen.
The Persian period and Azd tribal migration.
The historical relationship between Oman and the dominant empires of Persia has been a subject of intense scholarly investigation. During the 1970s and 1980s, prominent historical scholars such as John C. Wilkinson posited, relying primarily on preserved oral history, that the Persian Achaemenid Empire exerted direct control over the Omani Peninsula during the 6th century BCE. According to this school of thought, the Achaemenid forces most likely governed the territory from a centralized coastal hub, which was likely located at Suhar. Under this historical framework, the northern half of Oman was presumably integrated directly as a part of the Makkah satrapy within the wider structure of the Persian Achaemenid Empire. It is further hypothesized that by the time Alexander the Great launched his sweeping conquests across the region, this specific satrapy may have still existed in some functional form. In contrast to the northern regions, central Oman developed its own highly distinct and indigenous cultural identity during this timeframe. This is known archaeologically as the Samad Late Iron Age cultural assemblage, which was named eponymously after the site of Samad al-Shan. In the northern reaches of the Oman Peninsula, the period categorized as the recent pre-Islamic period officially commenced in the 3rd century BCE and stretched continuously into the 3rd century CE. However, whether or not successive Persian empires truly brought southeastern Arabia under their total physical control remains a highly debated and moot point among modern archaeologists. This skepticism stems primarily from a stark lack of definitive Persian archaeological finds across the region, a fact that speaks strongly against the belief of total Persian dominance. Despite these archaeological ambiguities, certain historical texts offer specific political accounts. For example, the writer Armand Pierre Corsander Percival suggested that a local ruler named Shamir bin Wathil bin Himyar formally recognized the absolute authority of Cyrus the Great over the territory of Oman in the year 536 BCE. Much later in history, the Omani kingdom was successfully subdued by the military forces of the Sasanian Empire under the command of Varus during the Aksumite-Persian Wars. During this period of Sasanian occupation, a powerful garrison consisting of 4,000 Sasanian soldiers was formerly headquartered at a site known as Jamsetyurd or Jamshedgurd, which corresponds to modern-day Jebel Garabay, also known locally as Falej al-Suk. Parallel to these imperial interactions, the demographic fabric of Oman was permanently reshaped by massive internal migrations within the Arabian Peninsula. Over the course of multiple centuries, starting specifically from the second half of the first millennium BCE, successive waves of Semitic-speaking peoples began migrating from central and western Arabia toward the east. The most historically significant of these migrating tribal groups are collectively known as the Azd. Upon settling in Oman, these tribes primarily made a living by engaging in fishing, farming, herding, or stock breeding. This ancient migration explains why many present-day Omani families can directly trace their ancestral roots back to various other parts of Arabia. The overarching process of Arab migration into Oman originated from both northwestern and southwestern Arabia. Those tribal groups who chose to settle permanently in the region were forced to compete intensely with the indigenous population for access to the best available arable land. When these Arab tribes first began their migration into Oman, they arrived as two completely distinct groups. The first group comprised a specific segment of the Azd tribe that migrated directly from Yemen between 120 and 200 CE, a displacement caused by the catastrophic collapse of the famous Marib Dam. Conversely, the second major group, known as the Nizari, migrated from the Najd region in present-day Saudi Arabia a few centuries prior to the birth of Islam. While some historians argue that the Yoruba from Khartoum belonged to an older branch and were the absolute first settlers of Oman from Yemen before the subsequent arrival of the Azd, it is clear that the Azd settlers in Oman are the direct descendants of Nasser bin Azd, later becoming known as the Al-Azd of Oman. Approximately 70 years following the initial Azd migration, another distinct branch of the Al-Azdi tribe, under the leadership of Malik bin Fahm, who was the famous founder of the kingdom of Tanakites on the western side of the Euphrates, is believed to have settled in Oman. According to the historical accounts of Al-Kalbi, Malik bin Fahm was the absolute first settler of the Al-Azd. Malik is said to have first established his settlement in Kalhat. According to this narrative, Malik led an armed military force consisting of more than 6,000 men and horses into battle against the Marsban, an official serving an unnamed Persian king, in the famous Battle of Salou in Oman. This clash resulted in a total defeat for the Persian forces. However, modern historians note that this dramatic account is semi-legendary in nature. It appears to condense multiple centuries of complex tribal migration and military conflict, while serving as an amalgamation of various oral traditions from both the arriving Arab tribes and the region's original indigenous inhabitants.
The advent of Islam and the Imamate of Oman.
The 7th century CE marked a profound turning point for the people of Oman as they came into direct contact with and subsequently accepted the faith of Islam. The formal conversion of the Omani population to Islam is historically ascribed to Amr ibn al-As. Amr was dispatched by the Islamic prophet Muhammad during the historical military action known as the Expedition of Zayd ibn Haritha, Hizma. Amr was specifically sent to meet with two brothers, Jafar and Abd, who were the sons of Jalandhar and the recognized rulers of Oman at that time. Upon receiving the message, the rulers and the Omani people readily embraced the new religion. Durante la successiva dominazione dell'impero Umayyade, Omani members of the Azd tribe regularly traveled to the city of Basra for commercial trade, which had established itself as a major center of Islamic thought. The Omani Azd were formally granted a specific section of Basra where they could settle permanently and attend to their commercial needs. Over time, many of these Omani Azd who settled in Basra transformed into incredibly wealthy merchants. Under the leadership of al-Muhallab ibn Abi Sufra, they began to successfully expand their political power and influence eastward toward the region of Khorasan. It was within this environment in Basra that Abadism originated. Founded by Abd Allah ibn Abad, Abadism emerged as a moderate branch of the Kharijites, an Islamic sect that had originally split from the Mahakima. These groups had initially supported Imam Ali during the first fitna, but subsequently turned away from him after rejecting the process of arbitration at the Battle of Siffin in 657 AD. Around the year 650, the Omani Azd residing in Iraq adopted Abadism, and it subsequently became the predominant faith. Later on, the powerful Umayyad governor of Iraq, al-Hajjaj, came into direct political and military conflict with the Abadis, a clash that ultimately forced him to flee Iraq and return to Oman. Among these returning exiles was the prominent religious scholar Jaber bin Zaid. His return, alongside the return of many other highly educated scholars, greatly enhanced and solidified the Abadi movement within Oman. Al-Hajjaj subsequently launched a major military attempt to completely subjugate Oman, which was ruled at the time by the brothers Sulayman and Said, the sons of Abad bin Jalandar. Al-Hajjaj dispatched a military force under the command of Mujar bin Shiwa, who was directly confronted by Said bin Abad. This initial confrontation resulted in the total devastation of Said's army, forcing him and his remaining military forces to retreat into the Jebel Akdar mountains. Mujar and his troops pursued Said, successfully flushing his forces out of hiding within Wadi Masdal. Mujar then marched his forces toward the coast, where he confronted Sulayman bin Abad. However, this specific battle was won by Sulayman's defending forces. Undeterred, al-Hajjaj dispatched a second military force under Abdul Rahman bin Sulayman, who ultimately won the war and took over the formal governance of Oman on behalf of the Umayyads. The first official elective imamate of Oman was established shortly after the fall of the Umayyad dynasty, around 750 or 755 CE, with the election of Jana bin Abada al-Hinawi. Other historical scholars claim that Jana bin Abada originally served as a wali, governor, under the Umayyads and later ratified the imamate, asserting that Jalandar bin Masood was the true first elected imam of Oman in 751 CE. This first imamate reached the absolute peak of its power during the 9th century CE. During this golden era, the imamate established a powerful maritime empire whose fleet effectively controlled the Gulf. This occurred during a prosperous period when trade with the Abbasid dynasty, the Far East, and Africa flourished intensely. However, the authority of the imams eventually began to decline due to internal power struggles, constant military interventions by the Abbasids, and the rise of the Seljuk Empire.
The Nabani dynasty and the Portuguese era.
During the 11th and 12th centuries, the coastal regions of Oman fell under the direct sphere of influence of the Seljuk Empire. The Seljuks were expelled from the region in 1154, an event that coincided with the rise of the Nabani dynasty. The Nabanis ruled the country as mulik, or kings, while the traditional imams were reduced to holding a largely symbolic significance. The official capital of the Nabani dynasty was established at Bala. Economically, the Banu Navan controlled the trade in highly valuable frankincense along the overland route via Sohar to the Yabran Oasis, moving north toward Bahrain, Baghdad, and Damascus. It was during the rule of the Nabani dynasty that the mango tree was first introduced to Oman, brought by El-Fela bin Musan. The Nabani dynasty began to severely deteriorate in 1507 when Portuguese colonizers successfully captured the vital coastal city of Muscat. The Portuguese gradually extended their control along the coast up to Sohar in the north and down to Sur in the southeast. Other historians argue that the Nabani dynasty had ended earlier, in 1435 CE, due to conflicts between the dynasty and the Hinawis, which led to a restoration of the elective imamate. A decade after Vasco da Gama succeeded in his voyage around the Cape of Good Hope to India in 1497-1498, Afonso de Albuquerque captured Hormuz, marking the beginning of a 143-year period of Portuguese governance over Oman lasting from 1507 to 1650. In desperate need of a strong naval outpost to protect their global sea lanes, the Portuguese built up and heavily fortified Muscat, leaving remnants of Portuguese architectural style that still exist today. They colonized several more Omani cities to control the entrances of the Persian Gulf and dominate trade as part of a web of fortresses stretching from Basra to Hormuz Island. The Ottomans actively contested control of the Persian Gulf and Oman from the Portuguese during the 16th century. In 1552, an Ottoman fleet briefly captured the fort in Muscat during their fight for regional supremacy, but soon departed after destroying the surroundings of the fortress. At the Battle of the Gulf of Oman, the Portuguese decisively routed an Ottoman fleet. Later in the 17th century, using its bases in Oman, Portugal engaged in the largest naval battle ever fought in the Persian Gulf. The Portuguese force fought against a combined armada of the Dutch East India Company and the English East India Company, which was supported by the Safavid Empire. The battle resulted in a draw but led to the loss of Portuguese influence in the Gulf.
The Yoruba dynasty.
During the 17th century, the people of Oman were reunited under the leadership of the Yoruba imams. Nazir bin Murshid became the first Yoruba imam in 1624 following his election in Rustak. Imam Nazir and his successor succeeded in the 1650s in completely expelling the Portuguese from the coastal domains in Oman. Over time, the Omanis established a powerful maritime empire that actively pursued the Portuguese, expelling them from their possessions across East Africa and incorporating those territories into the Omani domains. To capture Zanzibar, Imam Saif bin Sultan pressed down the Swahili coast. A major obstacle to his progress was Fort Jesus, housing the garrison of a Portuguese settlement at Mombasa, which fell to Imam Saif in 1698 after a 2-year siege. Saif bin Sultan also occupied Bahrain in 1700. However, intense rivalry within the House of Yoruba over power after the death of Imam Sultan in 1718 severely weakened the dynasty. With their power dwindling, Imam Saif bin Sultan II asked for help against his rivals from Nader Shah of Persia. A Persian force arrived in March 1737 to aid Saif, but these forces rebelled against the Yoruba in 1743, prompting the Persian Empire to try to take possession of the coast of Oman until 1747.
The 18th and 19th centuries.
After the Omanis successfully expelled the Persians, Ahmed bin Said al-Busaidi became the elected Imam of Oman on the 20th of November 1744, establishing Rustak as the capital. His dynasty, the Al-Busa'id, continues to rule Oman into the year 2026. Since the revival of the Imamate, the Omanis continued with the elective system but gave preference to a qualified member of the ruling family. Following Imam Ahmed's death in 1783, his son, Said bin Ahmed, became the elected Imam. Said's son, Hamad bin Said, overthrew the governor of Muscat and obtained possession of most of the fortresses in the region, taking the title of Sayyid. Afterwards, Sayyid Sultan bin Ahmed, the uncle of Sayyid Hamad, took over power, and was succeeded by his son, Sayyid Said bin Sultan. During the entire 19th century, in addition to Imam Said bin Ahmed, who retained the title until his death in 1803, Azan bin Kay was the only elected Imam of Oman. Beginning his rule in 1868, however, the British refused to accept Imam Azan as a ruler, viewing him as inimical to their interests. This view played an instrumental role in supporting the deposition of Imam Azan in 1871 by his cousin, Saeed Turki, a son of the late Saeed Said bin Sultan and brother of Sultan Bargash of Zanzibar, whom Britain deemed more acceptable. Meanwhile, Oman's Imam Sultan, the defeated ruler of Muscat, was granted sovereignty over Gwadar, an area located in modern-day Pakistan.
British protectorate status and the Treaty of Sebes.
The British Empire was keen to dominate Southeast Arabia to stifle the growing power of other European states and curb the Omani maritime power that grew during the 17th century. Starting from the late 18th century, the British began establishing a series of treaties with the sultans to advance British political and economic interests in Muscat while granting the sultans military protection. In 1798, the first treaty between the British East India Company and the Al-Busaidi dynasty was signed by Saeed Sultan bin Ahmed. The treaty aimed to block commercial competition from the French and the Dutch and obtain a concession to build a British factory at Bandar Abbas. A second treaty was signed in 1800, stipulating that a British representative shall reside at the port of Muscat and manage all external affairs with other states. As the Omani Empire weakened, British influence over Muscat grew throughout the 19th century. In 1854, a deed of cession of the Omani Kuria Muria Islands to Britain was signed by the Sultan of Muscat and the British government. The British government achieved predominating control over Muscat, which impeded competition from other nations. Between 1862 and 1892, political residents Louis Pelly and Edward Ross played an instrumental role in securing British supremacy over the Persian Gulf and Muscat through a system of indirect governance. By the end of the 19th century, and with the loss of its African dominions and revenues, British influence increased to the point that the sultans became heavily dependent on British loans and signed declarations to consult the British government on all important matters. The Sultanate thus came de facto under the British sphere. Zanzibar was a valuable property as the main slave market of the Swahili coast and a major producer of cloves, becoming an increasingly important part of the Omani Empire, which led Said bin Sultan to make it the capital of the empire in 1837. In 1856, under British arbitration, Zanzibar and Muscat became two different sultanates. The Hajar Mountains, of which the Jebel Akhdar is a part, separate the country into two distinct regions, the interior and the coastal area dominated by the capital, Muscat. The British imperial development over Muscat and Oman during the 19th century led to a renewed revival of the cause of the Imamate in the interior of Oman, which has appeared in cycles for more than 1,200 years. The British political agent residing in Muscat owed the alienation of the interior of Oman to the vast influence of the British government over Muscat, describing it as completely self-interested and without regard to the social and political conditions of the locals. In 1913, Imam Salim al-Qurusi instigated an anti-Muscat rebellion that lasted until 1920, when the Sultanate established peace with the Imamate by signing the Treaty of Sebes. The treaty was brokered by Britain, which had no economic interest in the interior of Oman at that time. It granted autonomous rule to the Imamate in the interior of Oman and recognized the sovereignty of the coast of Oman, the Sultanate of Muscat. In 1920, Imam Salim al-Qurusi died and Muhammad al-Khalili was elected. On the 10th of January 1923, an agreement between the Sultanate and the British government was signed, forcing the Sultanate to consult with the British political agent in Muscat and obtain the approval of the High Government of India to extract oil. On the 31st of July 1928, the Red Line Agreement was signed between the Anglo-Persian Company, Royal Dutch, Shell, Compagnie Française des Pétroles, Near East Development Corporation, and Calouste Gulbenkian to collectively produce oil in the post-Ottoman Empire region, with each major company holding 23.75% of shares and Gulbenkian holding 5%. The agreement stipulated that no signatory could pursue oil concessions within the area without including all other stakeholders. In 1929, the members established the Iraq Petroleum Company, IPC. On the 13th of November 1931, Sultan Timur bin Faisal abdicated.
The reign of Sultan Said bin Timur.
Said bin Timur officially became the Sultan of Muscat on the 10th of February 1932. The rule of Sultan Said, a very complex character, was backed by the British government and has been characterized as being feudal, reactionary, and isolationist. The British government maintained vast administrative control over the Sultanate. The Defense Secretary, Chief of Intelligence, and Chief Advisor to the Sultan were British, and all ministers except for two were British. In 1937, an agreement between the Sultan and the Iraq Petroleum Company, IPC, a consortium of oil companies that was 23.75% British-owned, was signed to grant oil concessions to IPC. After failing to discover oil in the Sultanate, IPC became intensely interested in promising geological formations near Fahd, located within the Imamate. IPC offered financial support to the Sultan to raise an armed force against any potential resistance by the Imamate. Upon the outbreak of World War II, the Sultan of Oman declared war on Germany on September 10, 1939. During the war, Oman had a strategic role in the defense of the United Kingdom's trade routes and was never attacked. In 1943, the Royal Air Force established stations on Masira Island, Raf Masira, and at Ras Al Had, and air sea rescue units were stationed in Oman. No. 244 Squadron RAF flew Bristol, Blenheim V light bombers and Vickers Wellington XIIs out of Raf Masira on anti-submarine duties, while No. 209, No. 265, and No. 321 squadrons flew consolidated PBY Catalinas out of Russes. On October 16, 1943, the German U-boat U-533 was sunk in the Gulf of Oman after being struck by depth charges dropped by a Bristol Blenheim from No. 244 Squadron. The wreck settled at a depth of 108 meters, 354 feet, approximately 25 nautical miles off the Fujairah coast. 52 crew members died, and the sole survivor, Gunther Schmidt, was taken aboard HMIS Hiravati and made a prisoner of war. The wreck is now a popular recreational diving site. The December 1951 Treaty of Friendship, Commerce and Navigation between Oman and the United Kingdom recognized the Sultanate of Muscat and Oman as a fully independent state. In 1955, the exclave coastal Makran Strip acceded to Pakistan and was made a district of Balochistan, while Gwadar remained in Oman. On the 8th of September 1958, Pakistan purchased the Gwadar enclave from Oman for $3 million, and Gwadar became a tehsil in the Makran district.
The Jebel Akhdar War.
Sultan Said bin Timur expressed his interest to the British government in occupying the Imamate right after the death of Imam al-Khalili, taking advantage of potential instability when elections were due. The British political agent in Muscat believed the only method of gaining access to the oil reserves in the interior was by assisting the Sultan in taking over the Imamate. In 1946, the British government offered arms, ammunition, auxiliary supplies, and officers to prepare the Sultan to attack. In May 1954, Imam al-Khalili died and Ghalib al-Hinai was elected Imam. Relations between Sultan Said and Imam Ghalib frayed over the dispute about oil concessions. In December 1955, Sultan Said sent troops of the Muscat and Oman Field Force to occupy the main centers in Oman, including Nazwa, the capital of the Imamate, and Ibri. The Omanis in the interior, led by Imam Ghalib al-Hinai, his brother Talib al-Hinai, the Wali of Rustak, and Sulayman bin Hamir, the Wali of Jebel Akhdar, defended the Imamate in the Jebel Akhdar War against British-backed attacks by the Sultanate. In July 1957, the Sultan's forces were withdrawing but were repeatedly ambushed, sustaining heavy casualties. Sultan Said, however, with the intervention of British infantry, 2 companies of the Cameronians, armored car detachments from the British Army, and RAF aircraft, was able to suppress the rebellion, forcing the Imamate's forces to retreat to the inaccessible Jebel Akhdar. Colonel David Smiley, seconded to organize the Sultan's armed forces, managed to isolate the mountain in autumn 1958 and found a route to the plateau from Wadi Bani Karas. On the 4th of August 1957, the British Foreign Secretary gave approval to carry out airstrikes without prior warning to the locals. Between July and December 1958, the British RAF made 1,635 raids, dropping 1,094 tons of bombs and firing 900 rockets at the interior of Oman, targeting insurgents, mountaintop villages, water channels, and crops. On the 27th of January 1959, the Sultanate's forces occupied the mountain in a surprise operation. Imam Ghalib, his brother Talib, and Suleiman managed to escape to Saudi Arabia, where the Imamate's cause was promoted until the 1970s. The exiled partisans presented the case of Oman to the Arab League and the United Nations. On the 11th of December 1963, the UN General Assembly established an ad hoc committee on Oman to study the question of Oman. The UN General Assembly adopted the Question of Oman resolution in 1965, 1966, and 1967, calling upon the British government to cease all repressive action, end British control, and reaffirming the inalienable right of the Omani people to self-determination and independence.
The Dhofar War and the Omani Renaissance.
In the Dhofar War, which began in 1963, pro-Soviet forces were pitted against government troops. As the rebellion threatened the Sultan's control of Dhofar, Sultan Said bin Timur was deposed in a bloodless coup in 1970 by his son Qaboos bin Said with British support. Qaboos expanded the Sultan of Oman's armed forces, modernized the state's administration, and introduced social reforms. The uprising was finally put down in 1976 with help from the forces of Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Pakistan, and Britain. After deposing his father, Sultan Qaboos opened up the country, removed Muscat from the country's name, embarked on economic reforms, and followed a policy of modernization marked by increased spending on health, education, and welfare, marking the beginning of the Omani Renaissance. Saudi Arabia invested in the development of the Omani education system, sending Saudi teachers at its own expense. Slavery, once a cornerstone of the country's trade and development, was outlawed in 1970. In 1971, Oman joined the United Nations alongside Bahrain, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. In 1981, Oman became a founding member of the Six-Nation Gulf Cooperation Council, and political reforms were eventually introduced. The country adopted its present national flag in 1995, resembling the previous flag but with a thicker stripe. In 1997, a royal decree granted women the right to vote and stand for election to the Majlis al-Shura, the Consultative Assembly of Oman, and 2 women were duly elected. In 2002, voting rights were extended to all citizens over 21, and the first elections under the new rules were held in 2003. In 2004, the Sultan appointed Oman's first female minister with portfolio, Sheikha Aisha bint Kalvan bin Jamil al-Saibia, to the post of National Authority for Industrial Craftsmanship. Despite these changes, there was little change to the actual political makeup, and the Sultan continued to rule by decree. Nearly 100 suspected Islamists were arrested in 2005, and 31 people were convicted of trying to overthrow the government, though they were ultimately pardoned in June of the same year. Before the Beijing Olympics, Oman became the stop of the Middle East's torch relay on the 14th of April 2008, covering 20 kilometers. Inspired by the Arab Spring uprisings, protests occurred in Oman during the early months of 2011. While they did not call for the ousting of the regime, demonstrators demanded political reforms, improved living conditions, and the creation of more jobs. They were dispersed by riot police in February 2011, and Sultan Qaboos reacted by promising jobs and benefits. In October 2011, elections were held to the Consultative Assembly, to which Sultan Qaboos promised greater powers. The following year, the government began a crackdown on internet criticism. In September 2012, trials began of activists accused of posting abusive and provocative criticism of the government online, and 6 were given jail terms. In 2013, Oman achieved the elimination of malaria diagnoses, according to the World Health Organization. Qaboos, the Arab world's longest-serving ruler, died on the 10th of January 2020 and was succeeded by his first cousin, Haytham bin Tariq. On the 12th of January 2021, Haytham named his eldest son, Thayazan bin Haytham, as the country's first crown prince and heir to the throne with an amendment to the Basic Statute.
Modern political and legal framework.
Oman is a unitary state and an absolute monarchy, in which all legislative, executive, and judiciary power ultimately rests in the hands of the hereditary sultan. Consequently, Freedom House has routinely rated the country not free. The Sultan is the head of state and directly controls the foreign affairs and defense portfolios, possessing absolute power and issuing laws by decree. According to International IDEA's Global State of Democracy Indices and Democracy Tracker, Oman performs in the low to mid-range on overall democratic measures, with particular weaknesses in political participation, including electoral participation and civil society. The judiciary branch is entirely subordinate to the Sultan. According to Oman's constitution, Sharia law is one of the sources of legislation, and Sharia court departments within the civil court system are responsible for family law matters, such as divorce and inheritance. While ultimate power is concentrated in the Sultan and Oman does not have an official separation of powers, the late Sultan Qaboos declined to grant the full title of Minister of Defense, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Minister of Finance to the ministers exercising those responsibilities, preferring to keep them within the royal domain. The current Sultan Haytham has granted the ministers responsible for those portfolios the full titles, whilst elevating the defense portfolio to that of a deputy prime minister. Since 1970, all legislation has been promulgated through royal decrees, including the 1996 Basic Law. The Sultan appoints the ministers and judges, and can grant pardons and commute sentences. The Sultan's authority is inviolable, and the Sultan expects total subordination to his will. The administration of justice is highly personalized, with limited due process protections, especially in political and security-related cases. The basic statute of the state operates as a constitution for the country and has been amended only twice, in 2011, in response to protests, and in 2021, to create the position of Crown Prince of Oman. Though Oman's legal code theoretically protects civil liberties and personal freedoms, both are regularly ignored by the regime. Women and children face legal discrimination in many areas. Women are excluded from certain state benefits, such as housing loans, are refused equal rights under the personal status law, and experience restrictions on their self-determination in respect to health and reproductive rights. The Omani legislature is the bicameral Council of Oman, consisting of an upper chamber, the Council of State, Majlis ad-Dawla, and a lower chamber, the Consultative Assembly, Majlis al-Shura. Political parties are banned, as are any affiliations based on religion. The upper chamber has 71 members appointed by the Sultan from among prominent Omanis and has only advisory powers. The 84 members of the Consultative Assembly are elected by universal suffrage to serve 4-year terms, while members are appointed for 3-year terms that may be renewed once. The last elections were held on the 29th of October 2023, and the next is due in October 2027. The national anthem, As Salam as Sultani, remains dedicated to former Sultan Qaboos.
Administrative divisions and foreign relations.
Administratively, the Sultanate of Oman is divided into 11 governorates. These governorates are further subdivided into 63 provinces, known locally as wilayats. In terms of its international presence, since 1970, Oman has pursued a moderate foreign policy and has expanded its diplomatic relations dramatically. Notably, Oman is among the very few Arab countries that have maintained friendly ties with Iran. Yusuf bin Alawi bin Abdullah serves as the Sultanate's minister responsible for foreign affairs. In strategic military diplomatic cooperation, Oman allowed the British Royal Navy and the Indian Navy access to the port facilities of Al Duqm Port and Dry Dock.
Military capability and expenditure.
Oman maintains a highly funded military apparatus. SIPRI's estimation of Oman's military and security expenditure as a percentage of GDP in 2020 was 11%, making it the world's highest rate in that year, which was higher than Saudi Arabia's 8.4%. Oman's average military spending as a percentage of GDP between 2016 and 2018 was around 10%, while the world's average during the same period was 2.2%. Oman's military manpower totaled 44,100 in 2006, including 25,000 men in the army, 4,200 sailors in the navy, and an air force with 4,100 personnel. The royal household maintained 5,000 guards, 1,000 in special forces, 150 sailors in the royal yacht fleet, and 250 pilots and ground personnel in the royal flight squadrons. Oman also maintains a modestly sized paramilitary force of 4,400 men. The Royal Army of Oman had 25,000 active personnel in 2006, plus a small contingent of royal household troops. Despite comparatively large military spending, it has been relatively slow to modernize its forces. Oman has a relatively limited number of tanks, including 6 M60A1, 73 M60A3, and 38 Challenger 2 main battle tanks, as well as 37 aging Scorpion light tanks. The Royal Air Force of Oman has approximately 4,100 men, with 36 combat aircraft and no armed helicopters. Combat aircraft include 20 aging Jaguars, 12 Hawk Mk203s, 4 Hawk Mk103s, and 12 PC-9 turboprop trainers with a limited combat capability, alongside one squadron of 12 F-16C D aircraft, 4 A202-18 Bravos, and 8 MFI-17B Mushakus. The Royal Navy of Oman had 4,200 men in 2000, is headquartered at Seb, and maintains bases at Awi, Ghanem Island, Musandam, and Salalah. In 2006, Oman had 10 surface combat vessels, including 2 1,450-ton Kahir-class corvettes and 8 ocean-going patrol boats. The Omani Navy also possessed one 2,500-ton Nasser al-Bahr-class LSL, capable of carrying 240 troops and 7 tanks, with a helicopter deck and at least 4 landing craft. Oman ordered 3 Kharif-class corvettes from the VT Group for £400 million in 2007, which were built at Portsmouth. In 2010, Oman spent $4.074 billion United States dollars on military expenditures, representing 8.5% of the gross domestic product. The Sultanate has a long history of association with the British military and defense industry, and according to SIPRI, Oman was the 23rd largest arms importer from 2012 to 2016.
Geography, climate, and natural landscape.
Oman lies geographically between latitude 16 degrees north and 28 degrees north, and longitudes 52 degrees east and 60 degrees east. A gravel desert plain covers most of central Oman, with mountain ranges stretching along the north, the Hajar Mountains, and the southeast coast. The Dhofar Mountains. The country's main cities are located within these regions, including the capital city Muscat, Sohar and Sour in the north, and Salalah in the south and Musandam. Oman's climate is hot and dry in the interior and humid along the coast. The peninsula of Musandam, strategically located on the Strait of Hormuz, is an exclave separated from the rest of Oman by the United Arab Emirates. Madha, another exclave, is an enclave within UAE territory located halfway between the Musandam Peninsula and the main body of Oman. Madha, part of the Musandam Governorate, covers approximately 75 square kilometers. Madha's boundary was settled in 1969, with its northeast corner barely 10 meters from the Fujairah Road. Within the Madha exclave is a UAE enclave called Nawa, belonging to the Emirate of Sharjah, situated about 8 kilometers west of the town of New Madha, consisting of about 40 houses with a clinic and telephone exchange. The central desert of Oman is a notable source of meteorites for scientific analysis. Like the rest of the Persian Gulf, Oman generally has one of the hottest climates in the world, with summer temperatures in Muscat and northern Oman averaging 30 to 40 degrees Celsius. Oman receives little rainfall. Annual rainfall in Muscat averages 100 mm, occurring mostly in January. In the south, the Dhofar Mountains area near Salalah has a tropical-like climate and receives seasonal rainfall from late June to late September as a result of monsoon winds from the Indian Ocean, leaving the summer air saturated with cool moisture and heavy fog. Summer temperatures in Salalah range from 20 to 30 degrees Celsius, which is relatively cool compared to northern Oman. The mountain areas receive more rainfall, and annual rainfall on the higher parts of the Jabal Akhdar probably exceeds 400 mm. Low temperatures in the mountainous areas lead to snow cover once every few years. Some parts of the coast, particularly near the island of Masira, sometimes receive no rain at all within the course of a year. The climate is generally very hot, with temperatures reaching around 54 degrees Celsius at its peak in the hot season from May to September. On the 26th of June 2018, the village of Karayat set the record for the highest minimum temperature in a 24-hour period at 42.6 degrees Celsius. Oman also possesses many wadis, which are river valleys that can temporarily fill with water when rain occurs.
Biodiversity and environmental challenges.
Desert shrub and desert grass, common in southern Arabia, are found in Oman, but vegetation is sparse in the interior plateau, which is largely gravel desert. The greater monsoon rainfall in Dhofar and the mountains makes the growth there more luxuriant during summer. Coconut palms grow plentifully on the coastal plains of Dhofar, and frankincense is produced in the hills, with abundant oleander and varieties of acacia. The Hajar Mountains are a distinct ecoregion, representing the highest points in eastern Arabia, with wildlife that includes the Arabian tahr. Indigenous mammals include the leopard, hyena, fox, wolf, hare, oryx, and ibex. Birds include the vulture, eagle, stork, bustard, Arabian partridge, bee-eater, falcon, and sunbird. In 2001, Oman had 9 endangered species of mammals, 5 endangered types of birds, and 19 threatened plant species. Decrees have been passed to protect endangered species, including the Arabian leopard, Arabian oryx, mountain gazelle, goited gazelle, Arabian tahr, green sea turtle, hawksbill turtle, and olive ridley turtle. However, the Arabian Oryx Sanctuary was the first site ever to be deleted from UNESCO's World Heritage List, following the government's 2007 decision to reduce the site's area by 90% to clear the way for oil prospectors. Local and national entities have noted the unethical treatment of animals in Oman, particularly stray dogs and cats, which are often the victims of torture, abuse, or neglect. The only approved method of decreasing the stray dog population is shooting by police officers. The Oman government has refused to implement a spay and neuter program or create any animal shelters. Cats, while seen as more acceptable than dogs, are viewed as pests and frequently die of starvation or illness. In recent years, Oman has become a popular spot for whale watching, highlighting the critically endangered Arabian humpback whale, sperm whales, and pygmy blue whales. In terms of climate action, major challenges remain to be solved per the United Nations Sustainable Development 2019 Index. The per capita CO2 emissions from energy and embodied in fossil fuel exports are very high, while imported CO2 emissions and the percent of the population affected by climate-related disasters are low.
The Omani economy, oil, and gas sectors.
Oman's basic statute of the state expresses in Article 11 that the national economy is based on justice and the principles of a free economy. By regional standards, Oman has a relatively diversified economy but remains dependent on oil exports. In terms of monetary value, mineral fuels accounted for 82.2% of total product exports in 2018. Tourism is the fastest growing industry in Oman. Other sources of income, agriculture and industry, are small in comparison and account for less than 1% of the country's exports, but diversification is seen as a priority by the government. Agriculture, often subsistence in its character, produces dates, limes, grains, and vegetables, but with less than 1% of the country under cultivation, Oman is likely to remain a net importer of food. Oman's socio-economic structure is described as a hyper-centralized rentier welfare state. The largest 10% of corporations in Oman are the employers of almost 80% of Omani nationals in the private sector. Half of the private sector jobs are classified as elementary. 1/3 of employed Omanis are in the private sector, while the remaining majority are in the public sector, and this hyper-centralized structure produces a monopoly-like economy. Since a slump in oil prices in 1998, Oman has made active plans to diversify its economy, placing a greater emphasis on tourism and infrastructure. Oman had a 2020 vision to diversify the economy established in 1995, which targeted a decrease in oil share to less than 10% of GDP by 2020, but it was rendered obsolete in 2011, leading Oman to establish its 2040 vision. A free trade agreement with the United States took effect the 1st of January 2009, eliminating tariff barriers on consumer and industrial products and providing strong protections for foreign businesses investing in Oman. Oman's foreign workers send an estimated $10 billion annually to their home states in Asia and Africa, with more than half of them earning a monthly wage of less than $400. The largest foreign community is from several Indian states, representing more than half of the entire workforce. Salaries for overseas workers are less than those for Omani nationals, though still 2 to 5 times higher than for the equivalent job in India. In terms of foreign direct investment, FDI, total investments in 2017 exceeded $24 billion. The highest share went to the oil and gas sector, representing around $13 billion, 54.2%, followed by financial intermediation at $3.66 billion, 15.3%. FDI is dominated by the United Kingdom with an estimated value of $11.56 billion, 48%, followed by the UAE at $2.6 billion, 10.8%, and Kuwait at $1.1 billion, 4.6%. In 2018, Oman had a budget deficit of 32% of total revenue and a government debt to GDP ratio of 47.5%. Oman's military spending to GDP between 2016 and 2018 averaged 10%, while the world's average was 2.2%. Health spending to GDP in 2015 and 2016 averaged 4.3%, compared to a world average of 10%. Research and development spending between 2016 and 2017 averaged 0.24%, significantly lower than the world's average of 2.2%. Oman's government spending on education to GDP in 2016 was 6.11%, while the world's average was 4.8% in 2015. Oman's proven reserves of petroleum total about 5.5 billion barrels, ranking 25th largest in the world. Oil is extracted and processed by Petroleum Development Oman, PDO, with proven reserves holding approximately steady, although oil production has been declining. The Ministry of Energy and Minerals is responsible for all oil and gas infrastructure and projects. Following the 1970s energy crisis, Oman doubled its oil output between 1979 and 1985. In 2018, oil and gas represented 71% of the government's revenues, while in 2016, it represented 72%, indicating that the government's reliance on oil and gas as a source of income dropped by 1% from 2016 to 2018. The oil and gas sector represented 30.1% of the nominal GDP in 2017. Between 2000 and 2007, production fell by more than 26%, from 972,000 to 714,800 barrels per day, but recovered to 816,000 barrels in 2009 and 930,000 barrels per day in 2012. Oman's natural gas reserves are estimated at 849.5 billion cubic meters, ranking 28th in the world, and production in 2008 was about 24 billion cubic meters per year. In September 2019, Oman was confirmed as the first Middle Eastern country to host the International Gas Union Research Conference, IGRC 2020, held between 24 and the 26th of February 2020 in collaboration with Oman LNG.
Industry, innovation, and infrastructure.
In industry, innovation, and infrastructure, Oman is faced with significant challenges, as per the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Index as of 2019. Oman scored high on the rates of internet use, mobile broadband subscriptions, logistics performance, and the average of top 3 university rankings. Meanwhile, it scored low on the rate of scientific and technical publications and on research and development spending. Oman's manufacturing value added to GDP rate in 2016 was 8.4%, which is lower than the average in the Arab world, 9.8%, and the world average, 15.6%. In terms of research and development expenditures to GDP, Oman's share was on average 0.20% between 2011 and 2015, while the world's average was 2.11%. The majority of firms operate in the oil and gas, construction, and trade sectors. Oman is refurbishing and expanding port infrastructure in Muscat, Duqm, Sohar, and Salalah to expand tourism, local production, and export shares. It is also expanding downstream operations by constructing a refinery and petrochemical plant in Duqm with a 230,000 barrels per day capacity projected for completion by 2021. The majority of industrial activity takes place in 8 industrial states and 4 free zones, mainly focused on mining and services, petrochemicals, and construction materials. The largest employers in the private sector are construction, wholesale and retail, and manufacturing. Construction accounts for nearly 48% of the total labor force, followed by wholesale and retail at 15%, and manufacturing at 12%. The percentage of Omanis employed in construction and manufacturing is low as of 2011 statistics. Oman, as per the Global Innovation Index 2019 report, scores below expectations in innovation relative to countries classified under high income. In 2025, Oman ranked 69th out of 144 countries in the Innovation Index, which considers political environment, education, infrastructure, and business sophistication. Innovation, technology-based growth, and economic diversification are hindered by economic growth relying on infrastructure expansion, which heavily depends on a high percentage of low-skilled and low-wage foreign labor. Another challenge to innovation is the Dutch disease phenomenon, which creates an oil and gas investment lock-in while relying heavily on imported products and services in other sectors. Such a locked-in system hinders local business growth and global competitiveness in other sectors, impeding economic diversification. The inefficiencies and bottlenecks suggest a factor-driven economy. A third hindrance to innovation is an economic structure heavily dependent on a few large firms, granting few opportunities for SMEs to enter the market and impeding healthy market share competition. The ratio of patent applications per million people was 0.35 in 2016, compared to a MENA region average of 1.50 and a high-income average of approximately 48.0. Oman was ranked 74th in the Global Innovation Index in 2024.
Agriculture and the fishing industry.
Oman's fishing industry contributed 0.78% to the GDP in 2016. Fish exports between 2000 and 2016 grew from $144 million to $172 million, an increase of 19.4%. The main importer of Omani fish in 2016 was Vietnam, which imported almost $80 million, 46.5%, in value, and the second biggest importer was the United Arab Emirates at around $26 million, 15%, followed by Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and China. Oman's consumption of fish is almost 2 times the world's average. The ratio of exported fish to total fish captured in tons fluctuated between 49 and 61% between 2006 and 2016. Omani strengths come from a good market system, a long coastline, 3,165 kilometers, and a wide water area. However, Oman lacks sufficient infrastructure, research and development, quality and safety monitoring, alongside a limited contribution to GDP. Dates represent 80% of all fruit crop production, and date farms employ 50% of the total agricultural area. Oman's estimated production of dates in 2016 was 350,000 tons, making it the 9th largest producer globally. Total export of dates was $12.6 million in 2016, almost equivalent to its imported value of dates, which was $11.3 million. The main importer is India, taking around 60% of all exports, and exports remained steady between 2006 and 2016. Oman has good infrastructure for date production and marketing support but lacks innovation in farming, industrial coordination in the supply chain, and encounters high losses of unused dates.
The expansion of tourism and ecotourism.
Tourism in Oman has grown considerably recently and is expected to be one of the largest industries. The World Travel and Tourism Council stated that Oman is the fastest growing tourism destination in the Middle East. Tourism contributed 2.8% to the Omani GDP in 2016, growing from $505 million, $1.3 billion in 2009 to $719 million, $1.8 billion in 2017, representing a 42.3% growth. Citizens of the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, including Omanis residing outside Oman, represent the highest ratio of tourists at 48%, followed by visitors from other Asian countries at 17%. A challenge to tourism development is the reliance on the government-owned firm, Oman, as a key actor, which potentially creates a market barrier to entry for private sector actors and a crowding out effect. Another key issue is deepening the understanding of the ecosystem and biodiversity to guarantee protection. Ecotourism is a growing segment. One site in particular, Ras Al Jins, Turtle Beach, is a popular destination due to the annual nesting of the critically endangered hawksbill turtle, the endangered green turtle, the olive ridley turtle, and the loggerhead turtle. Oman has one of the most diverse environments in the Middle East, well known for adventure and cultural tourism. Muscat was named the second best city to visit in the world in 2012 by Lonely Planet and was chosen as the capital of Arab tourism of 2012. In November 2019, Oman made visas on arrival an exception and introduced e-visas, requiring visitors to apply in advance.
Demographics, languages, and religion.
By 2020, Oman's population exceeded 4.5 million, with a total fertility rate estimated at 2.8 children born per woman, which has been rapidly decreasing. About half of the population lives in Muscat and the Batina coastal plain northwest of the capital. Omanis are entirely Arab, with certain groups of Baluchi and African descent. Around 20% of Omanis are of Baloch descent, whose ancestors migrated centuries ago and are now considered native. Omani society is largely tribal and encompasses three major identities: the tribe, the Muslim faith, and maritime trade. The first two are closely tied to tradition and prevalent in the interior due to lengthy isolation, while the third pertains mostly to Muscat and coastal areas, reflected by trade and routes tracing to Baloch, Al-Lawatia, Persia, and historical Omani Zanzibar. Omanis of Balochi descent typically use the surname Nisba al-Baluchi. Gwadar was a colony of Oman for more than a century before Pakistan took over the land in the 1960s, though many Omanis remain there. Arabic is the official and most widely spoken language, belonging to the Semitic branch of the Afro-Asiatic family. Several Peninsular Arabic dialects are spoken: Dhofari Arabic in Salalah and the Dhofar Governorate, Gulf Arabic in parts bordering the UAE, and Omani Arabic in central Oman, which has spread elsewhere due to oil wealth and mobility. According to the CIA, main languages spoken besides Arabic include English, Malayalam, Baluchi, Urdu, Tamil, Bengali, Hindi, Tulu, and various other Indian languages due to foreign workers. English is widely spoken in business and taught from an early age, with signs appearing in both Arabic and English at tourist sites. Sindhi and its dialects, Jadgali, Lawati, Maimani, Kutchi, Al-Sai, are also spoken. Swahili is sometimes spoken among Omanis of Zanzibari descent. The Meri language is limited to Salalah and westward into Yemen, though it was spoken further north until the 18th or 19th century. Endangered indigenous languages include Kamsari, Bathari, Hasusi, Hobbit, Jibali, and Meri, while Omani Sign Language serves the deaf community. In terms of religion, CIA statistics state that adherents of Islam are the majority at 85.9%, while 6.4% are Christian, 5.7% Hindu, 0.8% Buddhist, fewer than 0.1% Jewish, 1% other, and 0.2% unaffiliated. Virtually all native Omanis are Muslims, predominantly following the Abadi school of Islam, followed by the Shafi-I school of Sunni Islam in northern Oman, particularly Al-Batina north and south, with a very small minority following the Twelver school of Shia Islam practiced by Omani Ajam tribes. Most non-Muslims are foreign workers adhering to Jainism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Sikhism, Hinduism, or Christianity. Christian communities are centered in urban areas like Muscat, Sohar, and Salalah, encompassing Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, and Protestant congregations organizing along linguistic and ethnic lines, with more than 50 different groups active in Muscat. There are also communities of ethnic Indian Hindus, Christians, and a small Sikh community.
Human rights and labor conditions.
Oman's human rights record presents severe issues. Torture methods in use include mock execution, beating, hooding, solitary confinement, subjection to extremes of temperature and constant noise, abuse, and humiliation, with numerous reports of such treatment perpetrated by security forces on protesters and detainees. Several prisoners detained in 2012 complained of sleep deprivation, extreme temperatures, and solitary confinement. Homosexuality is criminalized. The government decides who can be a journalist, permission can be withdrawn at any time, and censorship and self-censorship are constant factors. Omanis have limited access to political information, and journalists must rely on news compiled by the official news agency on some issues. The government has extended media control to blogs and websites via royal decree. Public meetings cannot be held without approval, and setting up an NGO requires a license, as the government does not permit independent civil society associations. In 2016, a court sentenced 3 journalists to prison and closed their newspaper permanently over an article alleging judicial corruption. Omani law completely prohibits criticism of the Sultan and government, and police do not need search warrants to enter homes. The law does not provide citizens with the right to change their government, and figures are not subject to financial disclosure laws. Criticism of government figures is suppressed, and book publication, importation, and distribution are restricted. Until 2023, citizens needed permission to marry foreigners, but an April 2023 royal decree removed this requirement. Women face discrimination, being excluded from certain state benefits like housing loans and denied equal rights under personal status law. The plight of domestic workers is a taboo subject, and migrant workers remain insufficiently protected against exploitation, though in 2011 the Philippines deemed only Oman and Israel safe for Filipino migrants in the Middle East.
Education and public health.
Oman scored high as of 2019 on lower secondary school completion and on the literacy rate between ages 15 and 24, at 99.7% and 98.7% respectively. However, the net primary school enrollment rate in 2019 was 94.1%, rated as challenges remain by UN SDG standards, as was its overall quality of education evaluation at 94.8. Higher education produces a surplus in humanities and liberal arts but an insufficient number in technical and scientific fields to meet market demand. Accreditation standards and mechanisms focus on input assessments rather than output, representing areas for improvement according to a 2014 UNCTAD report. The BTI 2018 report recommends focusing more on personal initiative and critical perspective. Oman ranked 84th in the Global Innovation Index in 2020, down from 80th in 2019. The adult literacy rate in 2010 was 86.9%. According to Webometrics, top universities include Sultan Qaboos University, Dhofar University, and the University of Nizwa. In health, the undernourished share dropped from 11.7% in 2003 to 5.4% in 2016, but remains double the level of high-income economies, 2.7%. Essential health services coverage in 2015 was 77%, higher than the world average of 54% but lower than high-income levels at 83%. Since 1995, child vaccination rates have consistently exceeded 99%. Road incident death rates decreased from 98.9 per 100,000 in 1990 to 47.1 per 100,000 in 2017, but remain significantly above the global average of 15.8. Health spending to GDP between 2015 and 2016 averaged 4.3%, below the world average of 10%. Mortality due to air pollution was 53.9 per 100,000 in 2016, though in 2019 the WHO ranked Oman as the least polluted country in the Arab world, ranking 112th in Asia among the highest polluted countries. Life expectancy at birth was 76.1 years in 2010, with 2.1 physicians and 2.1 hospital beds per 1,000 people. Population access to healthcare was 89% in 1993, rising to 99% in 2000, when its health system was ranked 8th globally by the WHO.
National currency and financial status.
The official currency is the Omani Rial, OMR, issued by the Central Bank of Oman, CBO. The Rial is subdivided into 1,000 paisa, making it one of only a handful of global currencies divided into 1,000 rather than 100 subunits. As of 2025, the Omani Rial is the third highest valued currency unit in the world, trailing only the Kuwaiti dinar and the Bahraini dinar.
Omani culture, traditional dress, and art.
Oman shares cultural traits with its GCC neighbors but remains unique due to geography, history, and economics. Cultural heterogeneity makes it distinct from other Gulf states, with greater diversity stemming from historical expansion to the Swahili coast and Indian Ocean. Oman has a long tradition of shipbuilding, with Sur being a famous shipbuilding city. An Al Ganja ship takes a whole year to build, and other traditional types include a sunbok and Al Badan. Male national dress consists of the dishdasha, an ankle-length, collarless gown with a tassel, furaka or farak, in the neckline that can be perfumed. Underneath, men wear a wrapped cloth, and on formal occasions, a black or beige cloak called a bisht with silver or gold thread embroidery covers the dishdasha. Headdresses include the gutra, or musa, and the kuma cap. Men carry an asa stick and wear sandals, and the kanja dagger is worn at the waist on formal occasions, appearing also on the national flag. Omani women wear colorful costumes with regional variations, incorporating the kandora, tunic, a dishdasha over loose trousers, sarwal, and a head shawl, lihav. As of 2014, women reserve traditional dress for special occasions, wearing a loose black abaya daily, and sometimes a burqa in Bedouin regions. Most women do not cover their faces, and the Sultan has forbidden face coverings in public office. Traditional art stems from tribal handicrafts and self-portraiture dating to the 1960s. Contemporary exposure has grown with artists like Ali Al-Farsi, the first Omani artist at the Venice Biennale, and Radhika Kimji, exhibiting at Marrakesh and Haiti Ghetto Biennales. Beit Musna Gallery, established in 2000 by Sayyida Susan Al-Said, was the first art gallery, opening a second space in Salalah in 2016. The Omani Society for Fine Arts was established in 1993. The flagship National Museum of Oman opened on the 30th of July 2016, featuring 14 permanent galleries showcasing heritage from 2 million years ago, and is the first in the Gulf region to present material in Arabic Braille script for the visually impaired. Beit al-Zubair Museum is a private, family-funded institution that opened in 1998 and received Sultan Qaboos Award for Architectural Excellence in 1999.
Music, media, and cuisine.
Omani music features over 130 traditional forms of songs and dances, preserved by the Oman Center for Traditional Music, created in 1984, and sustained through oral transmission. Desert songs include Al-Takrad and Al-Tariq. Traditional dances include Al-Raza, a war dance using swords, and Al-Razfa, or Yawa, which features Harbia music performed at weddings and festivals. In 1985, Sultan Qaboos founded the Royal Oman Symphony Orchestra, composed entirely of Omanis, which gave its inaugural concert on 1 July 1987. In popular music, a 7-minute video featuring Al-Wasmi, Mazan al-Hadabi, and Muthana al-Raisi went viral in November 2015. Cinema is very small, with only one Omani film, Al-Boom, 2006, as of 2007. The government holds a monopoly on television through state-owned Oman TV, which broadcasts 4 HD channels. Majan TV, launched in January 2009, is the only private television channel, though its website was last updated in 2010. Satellite receivers allow access to foreign broadcasts. Oman Radio, which began broadcasting on 30 July 1970, operates Arabic and English networks. Private stations include Hala FM, High FM, Al Waisal, Virgin Radio Oman FM, Merge, and a station launched by Muscat Media Group in 2018. Oman has 9 main newspapers, 5 Arabic, 4 English. The media environment is highly restrictive, with the Ministry of Information censoring content, and Reporters Without Borders ranked Oman 127th in the 2018 World Press Freedom Index. The newspaper Azam was suspended in 2016 and not allowed to reopen in 2017 despite an appeal court ruling. Omani cuisine includes arsia, mashed rice and meat served at festivals, and shua, meat slowly cooked in an underground clay oven. Kingfish is a popular ingredient used in dishes like mashwai, roasted fish with lemon rice. Rukul bread is a thin round bread served with Omani honey or curry. Omani halwa is a popular sweet made of raw sugar and nuts, serving as a symbol of hospitality alongside coffee. Alcohol is only available over the counter to non-Muslims.
Sports and recreation.
In October 2004, the government established the Ministry of Sports Affairs. The national football team won the 19th Arabian Gulf Cup in Muscat, 2009, and the 23rd Arabian Gulf Cup in Kuwait, 2018. Traditional sports include dhow, horse and camel racing, bullfighting, and falconry. Oman and Fujairah are the only Middle Eastern regions practicing a variant of bullfighting known as bull butting, particularly in the Al Batina area. The Oman Olympic Committee organized the 2003 Olympic Days. Muscat hosted the 2010 Asian Beach Games, and its beach volleyball team competed in the AVC Continental Cup. The Sultan Qaboos Sports Complex contains a 50-meter swimming pool and hosted the first El Clasico outside Spain in 2014. The Tour of Oman professional cycling race takes place in February. Oman hosted the 2011 FIFA Beach Soccer World Cup qualifiers and the 2012 Beach Handball World Championships. In cricket, Oman qualified for the 2016 and 2021 T20 World Cups, co-hosting the 2021 edition alongside the UAE. In 2024, Oman competed in the Touch Rugby World Cup in Nottingham, its first international rugby tournament.